Welcome to Sleeping Figures, where we walk slowly through soft worlds of dream and quiet imagination. These stories are here to help you rest, to drift, and to find the calm between your thoughts. The day is ending now, and the night begins its slow, steady breath. Take a deep breath in and let it slowly, gently fade away. Tonight we go, where the heat of a forge glows quietly beneath the rain. They say a blacksmith once shaped a blade that could wound even time itself. Yet what he forged was never meant for war alone. Long before the noise of kingdoms faded, his hammer sang through sleepless nights, and the flame waited for his final choice. So, settle your mind. Feel the weight of silence in the air and drift with us into a place where iron and ivy still breathe. Rain hissed softly where it met the forge, turning the coals into small pockets of sighing steam. Faelen stood there beneath the glow, shoulders bent, his hammer motionless, above a lump of metal that no longer seemed to breathe. The reflection in the molten pool fractured and mended with each flicker of light, showing half his face young, the other half worn by years of smoke and iron. The roof groaned beneath the storm's weight, and every drop that leaked through made a soft ring as it struck the anvil. There was a time these walls knew voices, men shouting for swords, boys begging to learn. Now only his breath lived here, rough and uneven. No banners hung by his hearth, no crests above the door. The world moved on without him, and the town sent quiet tasks to the man they once called master. He shaped plowshares and hinges now, small things that would not draw memory or war to his doorstep. When the ember dimmed, he stirred it with a rod lined in ash. Sparks shivered up, gold trembling beneath the rain's dull rhythm. The scent of wet soot entered the air, mixing gently with the faint tang of burned oil. His body knew the pattern of each motion: lift, strike, cool, but his mind drifted elsewhere, to green fields that once thickened with armies, to the forge songs he learned from a father whose face he could no longer recall. Then came the knock, slow, deliberate, the kind only metal-shod gloves could make. 3 beats against the oak door, each shake loosening dust from the forgotten beams above. Phelan's hand lingered near his hammer, though even that gesture felt more habit than defense. He waited, letting the sound of rain fill the silence. Between each knock, his breath dragging with the weight of the years. Before he spoke, "Come in, if the storm commands you." Hinges creaked, reluctant after months of neglect. Wind rushed inside first, scattering ash across the floor. A figure entered, armored and lean, water rolling off the crimson cloak of a warlord's envoy. The man carried no sword in hand, only a small coffer wrapped in seals of wax and bronze. "Faelen of the Third Forge," the envoy said, his voice crisp despite the rain. "By order of the warlord, you are summoned to complete a final commission." Faelen stared at the box on the table, watching steam rise where water met the metal lid. "I don't forge for kings anymore," he murmured, his voice rough from years alone. Their crowns fall quicker than I can fix them. This one, the envoy said, unclasping the box, isn't for a king, it's for time itself. Inside lay a shard pale as moonlight seen through water. Chronosteel, they called it. The glow bent around it, as if even the fire was unsure how to touch it. Faelen's breath caught. His reflection vanished inside its surface. The warlord wants a blade that can cut through time, the envoy said. You're the only one who can make it. Faelen looked at the coals, at the metal waiting for the hammer. Slowly, tired but focused, he lifted it. The rain's hiss joined the first quiet rhythm of the forge coming alive again. The forge breathed again. Though it no longer sounded like flame, it sounded like memory unraveling. Faelen spread the warped fragments of chronosteel across the bench. Each shard glinted with a rhythm larger than any pulse he knew. Light slid over its surface and startled his eyes. For a moment it looked like glass filled with moving smoke. The metal didn't reflect the forge, it devoured it, folding the glow inward and bending it back into shapes that no longer made sense. He set the first piece on the anvil and tested it again, pressing his thumb near the edge to feel the warmth travel through. It refused him, cold and stubborn. Faelen fed more charcoal, opened the bellows in slow rhythm, and felt sweat lifting from his arms before the metal even changed color. Then it began to stir. A faint hum rose, not strange or mystical this time, but like stone shifting in a deep mine, physical and near. He struck again, slower, deliberate. The blow scattered sparks across the floor. The sound carried through his ribcage and jaw, an ache that reminded him of years bent over anvils. This time the metal pushed back, vibrating under his hammer as if holding its breath. The smell of soot and wet iron flooded his nose, grounding him. He tightened his stance and hit again, jaw clenched, sweat dripping into the fire. He struck again. The glow twisted, pale blue edging toward violet. Visions curled through the smoke fields burning. A boy running but never reaching the gate. The shape of a woman at a window that the fire refused to touch. When he exhaled, his breath looked wrong, aged, as though it had waited too long inside him. Each blow cost him a sliver of what made him whole. A faint taste lost, a gesture forgotten. He fought to remember why his wrists were scarred, or how the old forge mark upon his shoulder had come to be. The chronosteel fed quietly, as if time itself had found a way to eat. When he paused, the silence throbbed. Outside, the rain had eased to a thin mist. The forge smelled of hot ash and something sweeter, like sap burning. He turned the shard with his tongs, examining the edge it was beginning to form. The pattern lines did not curve naturally. They bent backward on themselves, forming loops that no craftsman could file or predict. He reached for the hammer again, whispering almost without sound, "What are you then?" The light trembled. Somewhere in its depths, a voice nearly answered not word, but rhythm. The swing of the bellows matched it unconsciously. His breathing, too. It was like another craftsman had joined him, invisible but certain, beating time alongside him on some unseen anvil. A black speck of doubt rooted in him. He had felt this before the quiet surrender of control when work took over the worker. Yet never had it stolen him, piece by piece. He stepped back, wiping soot across his chest. The walls seemed older than they had an hour ago. Cracks spread, where he'd seen only plaster before. The nails trembled in their sockets, as if the structure of the place was being rewritten grain by grain. Faelen sat by the hearth, setting the hammer against the stone instead of letting it fall. The ember pit throbbed, steady and alive. He stared into it and thought of the envoy's command, forge a blade that can cut through time, a task for men with nothing left to lose. His jaw set. The thought should have angered him, but instead it stirred a quiet resolve. He pushed himself up, fed wood to the coals, and began drawing new tools from the dusty shelves as if rebuilding what his father once taught him. The forge needed to live again, and he would not wait for it to ask. He picked up the smallest fragment, holding it close to the firelight. Inside the cold gleam, faces shifted and disappeared. A soldier with half a jaw, a child screaming without sound. Then, briefly, his own younger face, looking back not with defiance but pity. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. The forge's heat pressed against his back. His skin prickled with static, as if he stood between waking and memory. He realized the longer he remained near this material, the more it took from him and the more he belonged to it. He could not tell whether the forging shaped the blade or the man. He worked through the night regardless, each strike heavier, each gasp shallower. The chronosteel softened gradually, yielding not to flame but to will. Its edge began to form, impossible thinness running between present and something far beneath it. The smoke around the forge deepened into colorless mist, full of murmurs that resembled songs sung backward. When exhaustion crept in, he leaned on the anvil, perspiration streaking through the soot on his arms. His head throbbed with images, people he didn't know, and wars he never fought. He felt the thread of his own life knot and reweave inside those glimpses. The cost of forging was no longer measured in hours or coal. It was measured in pieces of himself stripped away. He lifted his hammer for one last strike, and before the blow landed, a quiet thought crossed him. Am I making a weapon or freeing something trapped within it? The metal sang with its own answer, a tone too pure to be mortal. It cut through the damp air and lingered, like memory. At the edge of waking, he stared into the forge's heart until he saw nothing left but the faint outline of the blade to be, and the reflection of a man already fading into the smoke that remembered him. The mountain breathed beneath his boots, exhaling faint drafts that smelled of moss, copper, and something older. Faelen followed the fissure downward by touch alone, one hand pressed to the damp wall, the other gripping the small lamp he'd made from resin and wick. Its glow flickered weakly, as though the rocks drank more light than they gave back. He had not left his forge in years, but the Chronosteel's silence had become unbearable. It refused to rest, humming even in sleep. So he sought the only place left that might answer him. The undermarket waited far below the known veins of ore. Old miners used to speak of it when the ale grew brave, a city without time, where bargains remembered themselves. He had dismissed their tales once. Now the rumor felt less distant than dawn. As he descended, the air thickened with a low hum, neither voice nor machine. The tunnel widened into pillars of stone slick with condensation. Between them glowed strings of fungi arranged like lanterns, each giving off a gentle green shimmer. Figures moved beyond the light, slow, fluid, and wrong in their proportions. He stepped closer. The forms resolved into merchants seated at crooked tables, their wares spread across benches shaped from roots, bark polished smooth as glass. No coin changed hands. Instead, the air vibrated every time a deal concluded, like two memories brushing against each other. One buyer left smiling but paused halfway through the arch as confusion settled in her eyes. Her companions guided her onward, repeating her name until it sounded foreign even to them. A slender creature drifted from the crowd toward him. Its eyes reflected the lamp twice, over one silver, one black. "Smith of the above," it said, voice echoing like water poured over stones. "You have brought unease with you. Lay it on the counter if you would trade." Faelen set down the smallest sliver of chronosteel. "I seek what this metal is, how to tame it, how to stop what it's taking." The creature leaned close, scent of wet wood rising between them. "That shard eats the lines that bind moments. Few mortals can shape it without being split where they stand. You wish to learn its hunger. That price is weighty." "I will pay it," Faelen said, though his throat tightened around the words. It smiled, revealing teeth shaped like folded leaves. "Every trade here is equal measure, knowledge for memory. You may keep your name or your truth, not both." His hand trembled around the chronosteel. "Take what you must." The merchant extended a hand, translucent as oil-slick glass. When their palms met, Faelen felt a pull, not of flesh, but of recollection. Something slipped through him, drawn out as gently as breath on polished metal. Images scattered. A field of wheat under spring sun. Laughter echoing off barn walls. A girl's voice calling him home. Then cold. Silence. The merchant's grasp loosened. "Your childhood," it said softly, "spent and gone." He staggered back, chest tight. He tried summoning some sense of what he'd lost, but the space remained blank, a hollow echo faintly ringing. "What truth did that buy me?" The Fae tilted its head. "That blade you forged the world will divide beneath it. One path where men rule unchained by root or tide. Another where the earth reclaims all metal and mind alike. The wielder shall belong to both truths and dwell in neither. Do you still seek to finish it?" Faelen didn't answer, his tongue resting heavy, unfamiliar inside his mouth. Around them, the market shifted like breath beneath a quilt. Traders whispered, and the fungi dimmed in rhythm with unseen heartbeats. A child approached, holding a jar filled with fireflies that gave no light. She offered it to a buyer, who gave in return a tune hummed softly between two teeth. The jar sealed itself and went dark. Faelen turned away, dizzy. The price of every question here pressed upon him the weight of selves traded for fragments of clarity. He wondered how many of these merchants remembered why they sat behind their tables, if they ever did. He wandered through the winding stalls, past bones carved into flutes, mirrors that reflected seasons rather than faces, clocks that ticked backward. With each step, the air grew warmer, humming in echoes of the chronosteel buried beneath his coat. He felt it responding to this place, faint pulse against his ribs. The metal knew the rhythm of lost things. At the market's far edge, a pool stretched beneath a ceiling of roots. Its surface was still as poured glass. He knelt before it, hoping for water, but instead saw his reflection divided in two. One face bore soot and scars, weary from forge light. The other looked younger, eyes untroubled, hammer arm unscarred. When he blinked, the second face lingered a heartbeat longer before fading. The merchant's warning whispered again through the cavern. Stand in both worlds and belong to neither. He touched the chronosteel through his shirt, its chill biting into his chest. The choice waiting ahead felt larger than war, deeper than craft. The path back home dissolved behind him, yet he could not stay among these traders of memory. He rose, leaving the mirror water unbroken, and began the long climb upward through the whispering stone. Behind him, the market sound thinned into silence, only a faint echo followed, like gratitude from something that had fed well. The climb took him beyond the reach of dawn. By the time Faelen emerged from the valley's throat, twilight had already begun its long descent. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and somewhere above the ridgeline the wind carried the faint metallic cry of a forge not his own. He followed it north, across the abandoned rail of a burned forest, until the trees grew thick again, roots twisting together like buried veins. The Verdant Forge waited there half-grown, half-built. Iron braziers entwined with ivy, an anvil fused with living bark. Each breath he took shimmered with the warmth of flame and the wet greenness of sap. He touched a nearby root. It vibrated faintly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He knew then that the stories were true. The first forge had been born from the marriage of heat and earth, and here they met again. A shadow moved beyond the glow. When it stepped forward, the air around him froze in recognition. Her armor was silvered and old, streaked with moss in the hollows. Her hair short now, bound for battle, but the mouth, the eyes, he knew them before memory caught up. Lyra, he said, the name rasped through him, as though spoken by someone else. Faelen. She did not lower her guard. A long sword lay bare in her hand, its edge slick with the dew of fog. I hoped never to find you here. I could say the same, he answered, though his voice weakened beneath the words. You came for the same commission, didn't you? She nodded once. The warlord promised eternity to whoever finished the blade. A seat outside time. But you were always the stubborn one, refusing crowns when crowns fell to you. Their eyes met through the flickering forge light. 1,000 small details returned at once. The scar along her jaw he'd kissed before battle. The laughter they once shared over spoiled wine. He tried to summon anger but found only fatigue. The warlord lies, he said softly. The steel eats time. It promises immortality, but feeds on it instead. I know, she said. The sword in her hand lowered slightly. And still, I can't turn away. I have nothing left worth the years it will take. I don't want this fight. Then, lay down what you're making. He took a step forward, instead of answering, eyes steady, hammer held low but firm. No, he said, not yet. She raised the sword, and he met her halfway. The first clash struck like thunder, hammer against steel. Sparks burst between them, leaves shuddering from the branches overhead. Faelen drove his weight forward, forcing her back with sheer strength. She swung again, sharp and clean, but he caught the edge on his hammer's side and twisted. The sound cracked the silence wide. Each strike was a question rather than an attack, his breath steady, deliberate, reclaiming the movements that had once shaped his entire life. They moved in circles within the Verdant Forge, roots giving beneath their boots, sap splattering in arcs that hissed near the flames. Phelan's hammer swung like breath spent in prayer, Her sword whistled with the restraint of someone long accustomed to loss. When their weapons met, the contact tremored through the forest floor. Between strikes came silence, a pause laced with memory. He heard her voice, not in words, but in the rhythm of movement, like an old song carried on the shoulder of a storm. He answered without language, only the dull clang of his heart against her precision. A sudden parry drove her blade past his guard. Metal met flesh. Warmth spilled down his arm. He dropped to one knee, gasping as pain bloomed outward. She halted, sword poised for another strike, yet her eyes betrayed hesitation. "You still hold back," he said. "Why?" "Because you don't raise that hammer to kill," she whispered. "You never did." He looked at her through sweat and soot, breath catching in the ache of his chest. "What did we ever hammer out of each other, Lyra? Purpose, maybe hope, or maybe just the habit of surviving." She exhaled, the sound like a chuckle half broken by grief. "I wanted to believe in what you built once, but I watched you fade slower each year. The world doesn't treasure gentleness, Faelen. It forgets it." "Then let it starve," he said. The words left a trail of soot in the air. She stepped forward, pressing the edge of her sword to his shoulder, not deep enough to finish him, only enough to draw a tremor of blood. "You still forge ideas when all that matters is survival." Her hand shook once, then steadied. "Listen to me, Faelen. I have seen the warlord's army. They will come whether you finish the blade or not. And when they do, every tree here will burn. The only way out is to finish it and bargain from power." Faelen gritted his teeth through the throbbing in his arm. "Power is the easiest metal to warp. The harder you hammer, the more twisted it becomes." She recoiled, sword dipping. The vines near the forge flared, sensing their tension. For a long moment, they simply stared. The storm beyond the canopy rumbled low, unanswered. Then she leaned close enough for him to feel the scrape of her armor. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. "Even gods regret what they remake." Before he could answer, she turned away. Her footsteps softened into the forest's wet soil, vanishing into the folds of darkness. Her departure left the forge breathing more heavily, as if the roots themselves mourned. Faelen knelt, binding his shoulder with a strip torn from his sleeve. Blood sank into the damp moss, dark and immediate. Each pulse marked the tempo of his exhaustion. He stared at his hammer, glinting faintly by the coals. Around it, the ivy forge shifted shape, roots crawling closer as though inviting completion. For an instant, he saw her silhouette reflected in the molten sap, watching from the distance, caught between farewell and guilt. He stood slowly, one arm pressed against his wound, breath shallow, uneven. Each movement throbbed through him like iron cooling too fast, stubborn, painful, alive. Yet beneath the ache, a quieter pulse remained. Weariness shaped into purpose. Faint but steady, the path downward opened like a wound at the edge of the clearing. The vines parted, exposing a narrow descent that glowed with internal light. It beckoned him back to the forge's heart, to the place where heat and root intertwined. As he started down, the wind shifted behind him, bringing one last echo of her voice carried from somewhere unseen. "If you survive the making, remember what living costs." He paused, listening until the sound dissolved into rustling leaves. Then he continued, the rhythm of his steps merging with the low pulse rising from below. Each step drew him deeper, the air growing warm with the promise of both creation and consequence. The Verdant Forge awaited not as a refuge, but as judgment for the things he had chosen to shape and the lives that waited to be unmade. By the time his figure vanished into the glow, only embers remained where their battle had scarred the moss. Rain began again, soft and clean, washing the blood from stone and leaf alike, carrying it in thin threads down the roots that led to the silent, breathing core of the earth. It was there, far below, that the final forging would begin. Heat rose before sight returned. The air thickened around Faelen until every breath scalded his throat. The passage had narrowed and then opened without warning, leading him into a chamber that pulsed with light instead of flame. Roots hung from the ceiling like petrified lightning, coated in a sheen of amber sap that dripped slow as candle wax. Beneath them, the verdant forge breathed in waves of molten glow. The earth's heart beat through it, rhythmic, ancient, patient. He set his hammer on a slab of root-veined metal and watched the surface ripple faintly under its weight. Sap and steel had fused there long ago. They could no longer be told apart. In this place, even the tools dreamed. A low hum trembled through the walls, the voice of the mountain bearing witness. Faelen unwrapped the half-forged blade and laid it atop the anvil grown from wood and quartz. Chronosteel shimmered beneath the living light, its edge whispering the faint chorus of seconds lost to his making. He had no clear memory of placing the bellows or filling the trough. Still, both waited at his side, as if summoned by instinct rather than craft. When he pressed the pedal, the forge flared not red, but the color of sun filtering through new leaves. He lifted the hammer, but the glow moved first. From within the molten sap rose a silhouette shaped from ivy and soil, feminine in form but shifting with every blink. Her skin rippled with bark, her veins green and gold. Eyes opened slowly, reflecting the forge's brightness without fear. When she spoke, her voice blended wood rot and whined through reeds. "You've woken me, Smith. Do you even know what fire you've called down?" Faelen stepped back, one hand instinctively on his wound. "I sought no spirit, only balance. The metal bites deeper than any mortal flame." The figure regarded the blade on the anvil, her gaze sharp as sunlight on dew. "That metal carries the seasons undone. Each strike pulled a thread from your past and wove it backward. You bled time into it until it understood regret." He frowned, weary suspicion dulling his curiosity. "I forged what was ordered, and what was stolen in return?" she asked. He tried to speak of the memories lost, the laughter stolen clean from his tongue, but the words withered. Instead, a tremor passed through his hands, pieces that won't return. She approached him, leaving no sound in her wake. Ivy trailed from her ankles, rooting lightly before pulling free again. When she touched his temple, warmth bled under his scalp. Images surged his father's crooked fingers, showing him where to strike first. A child's laughter spilling from a yard bright with straw, the smell of bread carried on evening dust. The moments fell upon him too swift to bear. He gasped and staggered, back striking the anvil's edge. "These were yours," she murmured. "The years you traded for creation. You hollowed yourself to fill the shape of something that never asked to exist." He looked down at the blade, now quivering faintly as if aware of being spoken against. "Then undo it," he whispered. "Take back what it's taken." Her sorrow ran through the air like distant thunder. "Not all things can be unburned. The forge only mends by fire. What you forged may still choose to break. A rumble beyond the cavern drowned her final word. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Footsteps approached dozens, marching in disciplined time. The air shifted from living warmth to iron chill. Faelen turned as the first soldier entered the chamber, armored in black and silver, eyes dim behind visors. Hooks bound their breastplates. None had faces Faelen could name. Behind them strode the warlord, cloak dragging sparks through the sap. "So this is the root of it," the ruler said, voice echoing like hammer blows on a tomb. "Show me the weapon, smith." Phelan's gaze flicked from the soldiers to the spirit now fading into shadow. "It's not finished. You called time itself to heal," the warlord retorted. "Do not pretend weakness now. The world awaits its edge." The soldiers spread around the forge. Their presence bent the living vines aside, scorching them beneath the flicker of their torches. Sap hissed like wounded flesh. The spirit tensed, form brightening in defiance. "You bring death into a womb," she said coldly. "Leave before you scorch the roots that hold you." The warlord lifted a gauntleted hand. "Burn it." Flame caught the lower roots, first orange tongues devouring green veins. The air turned viscous, heavy with smoke that smelled of soil dying. Faelen rushed to the anvil, shielding the blade. Its hum deepened, drawing breath through every scar in the stone floor. The soldiers advanced, blades gleaming with mirrored fire. Then the forge itself retaliated. Sap erupted across the ground, glowing like liquid glass. Vines snapped from the walls and seized the advancing ranks, tearing steel apart, not in anger, but necessity. The spirit rose taller, her eyes two suns in the smoke. Every spark turned to seed, and every scream folded into new growth. Amid the chaos, Faelen stood still, horror and awe warring within him. Steel and bark met in violent communion, the forge singing both birth and ruin. He felt it pulse through him, the rhythm of molten sap keeping pace with his heartbeat. A single clarity formed in that union. Creation and destruction had never been separate crafts. Each swing of the hammer had always contained both prayers. He met the warlord's gaze through the smoke and flying ash. The ruler shouted orders, voice swallowed by the roar. Faelen did not retreat. He stepped toward the anvil, grabbed the half-forged blade, and lifted it again. The spirit's vines coiled around the intruders, but his hammer rose above them all, firm and defiant. He drove it down onto the metal, ringing a single note that shattered the stillness. The vines froze mid-motion, as if answering him, the air thickening into still light. For an instant, everything stopped: embers, soldiers, flame waiting for his next move. Faelen lowered his hammer slowly, voice rough with ash. "If both earth and man bleed from this, what purpose did my craft ever serve?" The spirit's reply was almost kind. "To remember that even gods must breathe between heartbeats." The vines loosened their grip. The soldiers, those still living, fell back. The warlord vanished into the glare, consumed or forgiven. Faelen could not tell. The cavern settled into the aftersound of rain striking iron. Faelen wiped the soot from his face, his eyes reflecting what remained of the forge. Roots blackened, sap simmering gold, the blade resting untouched at the center, like a single unanswered question. The spirit's glow receded into the molten pool until only her voice lingered, fading into whisper. "Now, Smith, what you finish will decide which heart continues to beat." He stood alone again, surrounded by the mingled scent of leaf and metal, the rhythm of their shared survival slowing to calm. For the first time, Faelen understood that the forge no longer required fire to live it, carried life within its memory of his hands. The hammer felt lighter now, almost forgiving. When he raised it once more, it was not to fight or obey, but to listen, to strike softly in cadence with the breathing earth that waited beneath the smoke. The blade hovered above the anvil, unearthly in its stillness. Light rippled beneath the surface, as though every second of the world swam just below its edge. Faelen stood before it, feeling the forge breathe through him sap and smoke mingling with pulse and memory. The fire's glow no longer burned. It shimmered with colors that belonged to neither dawn nor dusk. What he had forged was complete and impossible, a line between what was and what could never be again. He traced a finger along the flat of the blade without touching it. It sang faintly, each note a memory returning with new weight. The laughter he'd traded in the markets, the warmth of a lover's breath, the smell of rain on iron before the disease of wars. They came back one by one until his chest felt full and hollow all at once. Around the edges of the cavern, the roots quivered as if waiting for judgment. The spirit's presence emerged again, her voice slow as growth through stone. "A choice waits, Smith." Her form settled beside the forge, wrapped in ivy and shadow, eyes bright as molten veins. Give the blade to the conqueror, and his will becomes endless. Cast it back, and all the hours it devoured will spill into the soil again. Time will heal, but you will fade with it. Faelen closed his eyes. The forge answered with a steady heartbeat. For a moment, it sounded human. "All I wanted was to build something that endured," he said quietly. "But I shaped only hunger." The spirit's expression softened. What endures is not what resists change. It's what learns to bow to it. A tremor passed through the ground. The remaining soldiers stumbled into view, their armor dented, faces smeared with soot. At their center came the warlord, cloak trailing ash. His voice reached like a weapon. "Smith, the gods themselves bent their law for this steel. Time obeys you, now use it, and your name will outlive breath." Faelen lifted the blade. It hummed louder, strands of light spilling from its edge. The warlord's shadow fractured across the walls, split into 1,000 versions of command. Every order he'd ever given, every life undone. The spirit stepped closer, vines swaying toward the heat of that sound. Her voice wove gently through the roar. "You've seen what lies past every victory. Let go." The warlord countered, his tone sharp enough to cut stone. "You forged it for me. The pact is sealed. Strike once, and the world is mine to rule. Every wasted year erased." The two voices tangled the spirit's calm against the warlord's fury until the chamber itself seemed to choose sides. Roots strained upward, torches flared blue. The blade in Phelan's grasp began to resonate with both commands. Each breath he drew shortened time around him. Each thought scattered into mirrored echoes. He saw through the edge an impossible panorama. One world where the warlord stood triumphant, cities gleaming but lifeless, people marching as if sleep had conquered them all. The other, overtaken by forest roots threading through towers, rivers washing over rust. Mankind vanished into birds and moss. Neither sang of peace. Both reeked of completion without mercy. His knees weakened. The blade's hum turned into a cry metal, remembering every life it had stolen to reach this sharpness. He understood then that the weapon did not crave war or rule. It wished only to end the spinning of the wheel, to rest like cooled iron. And so did he. He looked to the spirit, voice rough and low. "If I return it to the fire, will it end this for good? Only what you have the will to finish," she said, watching him closely. "Every act remakes the one who chooses it." He turned to the warlord, eyes clear now. "And if I obey you, you live forever," came the reply. "And everything bends to your hand." Faelen's fingers tightened on the hilt, his breath uneven. "Then, I choose to build something that ends." He turned back toward the forge. The chronosteel trembled, resisting both destruction and worship. The spirit's vines reached toward the molten sap. The warlord's soldiers raised their spears. Time itself slowed, particles of ash freezing mid-air, every heartbeat stretched into eternity. In that suspended moment, Faelen felt history awaiting his hand. He lifted the blade higher, its light pouring across his face. The forge reflected two shapes of him, one crowned, one consumed. He whispered to neither. Instead, with a single motion born of all the exhaustion and small mercies that had carried him here, he cast the blade into the forge. The explosion did not roar, it bloomed. Metal and vine fused in radiant silence. The chronosteel melted into sap, the color of dawn, and every frozen ember began to move again. The soldiers dissolved into streaks of light. The warlord's command unraveled on his lips, scattering into seeds that vanished in the air. The spirit knelt beside the pool of molten glow, tears of chlorophyll tracing her cheeks. Beneath her hands, the earth pulsed once then steadied. Faelen sank to his knees. The heat washed over him, gentle as spring water. His scars cooled. Through the thinning haze he saw not ruin, but garden, a field unfurling where stone had burned, ivy-covered twisted armor, and flowers red as forging flame opened in the ash. The world stitched itself quietly, thread by living thread. He pressed a palm to the ground and whispered, barely sound at all. "Let it rest." Light folded inward, carrying his breath with it. His body eased back against the anvil, and for a moment he felt both young and endless, every loss returning as calm understanding. The spirit brushed her hand against his brow. "Smith, be mended." The last of the forge sank into silence. Sap hardened over the place where the blade had vanished, sealing in its hum until only the faint rustle of leaves remained. Above, the mountain released a long exhale, relieving ages of strain. By the time the first breeze reached through the broken roof, only ivy and red flowers marked where the forge once stood. Their petals shimmered faintly with iron dust, whispering his name each time the wind changed. The spirit rose alone. The dawn outside reached timid fingers into the hollow, lighting her from behind. She turned once, gazing upon the patch of earth where Faelen had knelt, and a soft smile crossed her wooden mouth. "Everything mended must one day rest," she murmured, his final words already part of her own breath. The forge sighed one last time beneath the roots, a settling sound of warmth cooling into memory. Then all fell quiet. The morning birds waited at the edge of the trees, unafraid now. Time, unbroken and calm, began its slow, even course. Morning came, neither bright nor dull, but perfectly measured, as if the world had learned balance. Overnight, mist slid softly along the hollows of the valley, gathering around the low mounds where the Verdant Forge had stood. Dew clung gently to every petal of the rust-red blossoms that marked the ground, each bead of water a mirror capturing the pale light. Nothing stirred except the occasional tremor of wind through ivy. Birdsong arrived in slow waves, hesitant at first, then layered and sure. The tones seemed to stitch the air back together, filling the spaces where metal had once rung. Beneath the surface, the earth exhaled warmth through fractures sealed with sap. The forge no longer burned, yet a faint hum lingered, subtle enough to pass for imagination, constant enough to remind that rest could hold its own pulse. Where Faelen had knelt, a shallow imprint remained in the soil, half shadow, half memory. No trace of soot marked it, only thin threads of green beginning to sprout. The flowers leaned toward that place instinctively, folding and unfolding like creatures who still listened. When the breeze shifted, it carried a whisper more suggestion than sound, his name dissolving back into the language of leaves. From the eastern ridge, the light deepened. The mountains caught the first gold of day and cast it gently downward. Each root glittered for a heartbeat before dimming. Time moved freely again, untroubled by loops or absence. It neither rushed nor hesitated. It simply continued, unobserved, complete. The woodland spirit walked among the iron-tinged blossoms. Her steps left no mark. Each motion drew a faint shimmer from the ground, like the echo of embers hidden beneath frost. In her presence, the vines unwound, refreshing their color. She paused over the small depression in the earth, brushing one slender tendril against the petals there. "I kept the promise," she murmured. "Your fire sleeps, not gone." The sound of her voice merged with the sigh of morning wind. As she straightened, sunlight touched her shoulders and splintered into a dozen green hues. For a quiet moment, she watched the horizon unfolding, farmland, distant river smoke, the first shimmer of normal life returning. Somewhere beyond sight, the remnants of the warlord's camp rested too, reclaimed by silence and vine. She sensed no triumph in any of it, only equilibrium. The world had remembered how to breathe without effort. Even the birds seemed to understand restraint. Their chatter softened as the wind steadied. Dew dripped from the ivy leaves, catching faint glints of iron in the soil below. Each drop carried the memory of fire cooling, transformed into seed. The spirit lowered her gaze to the small field before her. "Everything mended must one day rest," she whispered again, not as farewell, but as instruction written into the rhythm of growth. Above, a cloud shifted. Sunlight poured fully across the clearing, awakening the sense of wet root, young grass, and metal sleeping beneath. The hum of the hidden forge drifted upward once more, mellow as a heartbeat half remembered, then faded into quiet certainty. "Rest, Smith," she said, voice almost lost in the rustle. The day opened without spectacle. Only stillness answered, wide and kind, as though even time itself had settled into its workshop to listen. "Before we part, take a quiet moment to linger here in the stillness. Breathe slowly. Keep the same pace. The world holds now. If these weary stories bring you calm or company, leave behind your trace, your voice among ours. Subscribe for more tales of worn hands, gentle miracles, and the quiet peace found when fire finally sleeps.